Okay. All right. So now we are going to discuss about the active transport. Okay. So remember, active transport is a kind of transportation that requires energy. Why this kind of transportation requires energy or in the form of ATP? That is because the substance or the molecule is transported against concentration gradient. Okey, maksudnya ialah active transport ialah sejenis pengangkutan molekul ataupun substan melawani kecerunan kepekatan, iaitu daripada kawasan berkepekatan rendah from low concentration area to high concentration area. Disebabkan pengangkutan ni melawan kecerunan kepekatan, bukan daripada high concentration ke low concentration, tetapi dia daripada low concentration ke area of high concentration. That is why they need energy. So there are two types of transportation that use energy. First is the sodium potassium pump, and also number 2 is bulk transport. Okay, so we are going to discuss first active transports. So active transport is the movement of polar substances. Okay, so substance yang berkutub, which is usually hydrophilic substance. Okay, using assistance of protein, but it is transported against the concentration gradient, ataupun kita panggil following the electrochemical gradient. Okay, electrochemical gradient maksudnya ialah, you can see down here. Okay, so in other words, senang cerita, it is again concentration gradient, which is referring to from low concentration area to an area that have high concentration, with the help of energy and assisted by a kind of protein which is carrier protein. Okay, recap balik. What is carrier protein? Carrier protein is a kind of protein that is able to change its shape, yang boleh merubah bentuk. Okay, so example of transportation or active transport that use ATP is electrogenic pump that found in animals, plant, fungi, okay, contoh kulat, and also bacteria. Okay, tengok gambar ni. So here you have area of low concentration substance, and yang dekat kawasan sini ialah kawasan yang mempunyai substance yang berkepekatan tinggi. So this protein, this carrier protein, you can see it transports substances from low concentration to high concentration using ATP, energy. Nampak ni, warna kuning kecil tu ialah energy of ATP. Okay, alright. So looking back to the example. Okay, so tadi kita dah tengok example electrogenic pump. Apa itu electrogenic pump? Electrogenic pump is a transport protein that can generate voltage across the membrane. Generating voltage maksudnya dia boleh menghasilkan charge yang berbeza di dalam dan di luar membrane. Okay, example. Untuk animal cell, we have sodium potassium pump. Okay, a kind of carrier protein that is specifically to transport sodium and potassium. And for plant, fungi, and bacteria, the electrogenic pump is known as proton pump. So proton pump ni specifically untuk transport hydrogen ion ataupun H+ ion. Okay, right. So we are going to start with the sodium potassium pump. Okay, you have this in textbook. Boleh refer textbook. Okay, now Madam akan ajar process one step-by-step process related to sodium potassium pump. So ingat balik, what kind of protein is this? So this protein is able to change its shape. So it is carrier protein. Okay, now this is sodium potassium pump. So sodium potassium pump tugasnya adalah untuk transport sodium dan juga potassium. So look here, this is extracellular fluid, luar daripada membrane. So di bahagian luar, outside, and this is inside in the cytoplasm. So you can see here at the extracellular fluid, bahagian luar sel, concentration of sodium ion is high and concentration of potassium ion is low. Whereby in the cytoplasm, concentration of sodium ion is low and concentration of potassium ion is high. Maknanya sekarang ni ialah go back to the concept of sodium potassium pump. Dia mesti mengangkut substances against concentration gradient. Melawani kecerunan kepekatan. So, look at here. Sodium will be transported from the inside of the cell to the outside of the cell. Kenapa? Sebab kepekatan sodium ion di dalam sel rendah dan kepekatan sodium di luar sel tinggi. So, dia melawan kecerunan kepekatan. Dan as for potassium, you can see potassium will be transported into the cell. Kenapa? Because dekat luar ni concentration of sodium ion is low and dekat dalam concentration of sodium ion, concentration of potassium ion dekat luar is low and concentration of potassium ion di dalam cell is high. So apa-apa you must notice that kalau active transportation must be against concentration gradient. Daripada kepekatan rendah kepada kepekatan tinggi. Okay. Alright, now let's start and look at what happened. Okay. To sodium first. Okay. Now sodium is low concentration at the inside and high concentration at the outside. So sodium ion will be transported out of the cell. Okay. Cytoplasmic sodium ion, maknanya maknanya sodium ion yang ada di dalam cytoplasm will bind to the sodium potassium pump, right, with this affinity. Maknanya pada bentuk ini yang tenganga kat bawah ni, right, this protein, this carrier protein sangat mempunyai affinity yang tinggi, kecenderungan yang tinggi kepada sodium. So berapa sodium yang akan bind kepada carrier protein ni, sodium potassium pump ni? 3. You can see 1, 2, and 3. So 3 sodium ion. Okay. So as the 3 sodium ion binds to the carrier protein, it will stimulate phosphorylation of ATP. Okay, apa maksud phosphorylation? Phosphorylation maksudnya molekul ATP ni akan pecah. Dia akan jadi apa? Daripada ATP, dia akan jadi ADP plus phosphate. PI ni phosphate. Okay, apa jadi dengan phosphate? You can see here. Phosphate tu akan melekat kepada carrier protein. Okay. So the binding of 3 sodium ion stimulate phosphorylation by kinase, okay, a kind of enzyme, kinase using ATP. So what happened to the ATP? So you can see phosphorylation leads to the change in the protein shape, reducing its affinity for sodium ion, and then 3 sodium ion will be released outside. Okay. So bila ATP tu pecah, you can see ATP tu akan bind dekat protein tu. So bila ATP bind dekat protein tu, dia pump, you can see the shape of the protein will change like this. Dia akan berubah. Okay. And what happened to the sodium? Sodium, the protein will have low affinity. So protein tu akan mempunyai kecenderungan yang rendah. So that what happened, the sodium ion will release out. Okay. Right. So next what happened? So dalam keadaan tenganga yang belah atas ni pula, the new shape has high affinity for potassium ion. Dalam keadaan ini, potassium pula akan bind. Kenapa potassium bind? Okay, tengok balik dekat gambar yang pertama ni. Medium highlight ya. You can see here. Nampak ni. This one and this one. So potassium, okay, concentration of potassium dekat luar is low concentration of potassium at the outside of the cell, and inside of the cell have high concentration of potassium ion. So what happened? 2 potassium ion will bind to the carrier protein, and what happened lepas tu, bila 2 potassium ion bind je, the phosphate group will release from the protein. Tengok ni, phosphate group ni akan keluar. So bila phosphate group tu keluar, the loss of phosphate will restore the protein's original shape. So protein tu akan balik kepada bentuk asal dia. Nampak tak? Dia tengah sebelah bawah pula. And this shape have low affinity towards potassium, and potassium will release out. Okay, so you can see potassium ion are released, and then the cycle will repeat. So sodium ion pula akan bind. So that is sodium potassium pump. So secara conclusionnya, you kena faham ini. Okay, let's say this is our membrane. Okay, kena ingat dekat dalam sodium ion concentration rendah, potassium ion concentration tinggi. But at the outside of the cell, sodium ion concentration is high and potassium concentration is low. So that's why sodium ion will diffuse out. How many sodium ion? 3. Sodium ion will diffuse out, and at the same time, we will have 2 potassium ion to be entering the cell. 2 potassium ion. So itu tugas sodium potassium pump. Dia akan bawa keluar 3 sodium ion out of the cell and 2 potassium ion into the cell for every cycle. Okay, and against concentration gradient. Okay, now look at this video. So nampak tak ni? Okay, so let me repeat. Okay, now this is 3 sodium ion. Okay, and this is the 2 potassium ion. So whenever 3 sodium ion bind to the protein, okay, kita tengok lagi sekali. When 3 sodium ion bind, you can see we have phosphate attached to the protein, which cause the protein to change its shape. Okay, but whenever potassium ion bind dekat protein tu pula, the phosphate group will release and back to its original shape. Okay, right. So, and remember the concentration of ions. Sodium ion kena bawa keluar. Kenapa? Concentration of sodium ion dekat dalam rendah and concentration of sodium ion dekat luar tinggi. So, dia akan keluar. Okay, so what about potassium? Concentration of potassium ion dekat luar rendah, and concentration of potassium ion dekat dalam sel tinggi. So potassium ion will diffuse into the cell, okay, via active transport. Right. Okay, next one. Okay, the next electrogenic pump. Jenis electrogenic pump yang kedua, ingat electrogenic pump maksudnya sejenis protein yang boleh menghasilkan voltage across the membrane. Ini yang kita panggil voltage. Nampak dia ada perbezaan antara charge di dalam sel dengan juga di luar sel. Okay. The second type of electrogenic pump. So kita ingat tadi kita dah belajar electrogenic pump. Electrogenic pump ada 2. Yang first tadi kita dah belajar sodium potassium pump. Okay. The second one is this, proton pump. So proton pump can be found in plant cell, in bacteria. It use energy, which is ATP, to pump hydrogen ion out of the cell. Maknanya hydrogen ion daripada dalam sel keluar daripada sel, melawani kecerunan kepekatan. Tengok ni, hydrogen inside of the cell is low concentration and hydrogen in the outside of the cell is high. So, this proton pump use ATP to transport hydrogen ion from the cytoplasm into the extracellular fluid, which is against the concentration gradient. And when this hydrogen ion is pumped out of the cell, it will produce hydrogen gradient. So bila banyak sangat hidrogen kat luar ni, so ini kita panggil sebagai hydrogen gradient. Kecerunan hidrogen yang sangat tinggi di luar dan sangat sikit di bahagian dalam. Okay, so that is proton pump. Okay, look at this picture. Right, you can see this is a proton pump. Okay, now this is ATP that is used to help transporting hydrogen ion from the inside of the cell to the outside of the cell. Bawa keluar banyak hydrogen, so that dekat luar ni you have a very high concentration of hydrogen ion. And this will create what we said just now, proton gradient. Okay, all right. Okay, so that is the active transport. So before we go on, so Madam provide for you comparison between channel protein and also carrier protein. Okay, so ingat balik channel protein yang macam mana satu? Channel protein yang ini. It's like a tunnel. Okay, and carrier protein yang mana satu? Carrier protein yang bentuk dia boleh berubah-ubah tu. Ingat tak? Alright. Okay, apa beza channel protein dengan carrier protein? First, channel protein not involved in changing of shape. Bentuk dia tak akan berubah. Whereby carrier protein involved in change in shape. Dia boleh tukar bentuk daripada macam ni and dia akan terbuka belah atas. Okay, right, yang macam kita tengok tadi. Second one, channel protein usually involved in transportation of many substances. Dia boleh bawa macam-macam benda. Contohnya dia boleh angkut air lah, dia boleh angkut ions lah, right? But carrier protein usually transport specific substances. Contoh, transport sodium and potassium via sodium-potassium pump. Okay. The third one is channel protein usually involved in passive transport. Okay, ingat balik apa maksud passive transport? Passive transport is a kind of transportation that does not use energy. Okay, so bila kata not use energy means it transports substances from high concentration to low concentration. Macam dalam gambar ni. Nampak tak? Here you have high concentration and here is low concentration. So it move or transport substances down the concentration gradient. Okay, down the concentration gradient. Okay, whereby for carrier protein, it may involve in active transport as well. Maknanya kalau carrier protein, ada yang boleh guna secara pasif, ada yang boleh guna juga secara aktif. Kalau gambar yang awak tengok ni, this one is secara pasif, from high concentration to low concentration. Tapi kalau kita tengok tadi contoh yang kita baru belajar tadi, sodium, potassium pump. Okay, sodium, potassium pump transport substances against the concentration gradient. Okay, and next one is example. Apa example transportation use channel protein? Aquaporin, that is used specifically to transport water. Whereby example of carrier protein is the sodium potassium pump, that is specifically to transport sodium ion and potassium ion. Okay, Madam baru teringat satu benda lagi. Apa lagi kita boleh bezakan pengangkutan melalui channel protein dengan pengangkutan melalui carrier protein? Which one is faster? Which one is transportation agak sedikit slow? Carrier protein ke channel protein? Okay, good. Carrier protein transportation will be a little bit slower. Kenapa transportation using carrier protein is a little bit slower? Sebab transportation use carrier protein perlukan the protein to change its shape. protein tu nak kena ubah bentuk daripada satu bentuk kepada bentuk yang lain. So lambat kan? But for channel protein, it does not involve changing of shape. So transportation dia lebih faster. Alright. So that is the comparison between channel protein and carrier protein. So tolong salin dan tolong hafal. Okay. So that's it for the active transport and discussion about sodium potassium pump and also proton pump. So lepas ni we are going into the bulk transport. Okay, in the next video.